Hello, I'm Rosalind McKeever and I've got something very exciting to show you in this box. Believe it or not, this object is a hat, and it was made by the artist Eileen Agar in the late 1930s. This hat is known as the glove hat for obvious reasons, as it has this pair of leather gloves pinned to the front of the otherwise straw conical hat. There's only one of these. This is completely unique. This is an assemblage, a kind of 3D collage, because Agar has bought the gloves and then added the pink fingernails, but she's probably bought the hat as well, and maybe even this brooch. So what she's done is really bring these objects together to create this witty, irreverent hat. I better get my gloves on so we can take a closer look. Eileen Agar was a hugely important artist in the 20th century. And was at the centre of a cultural network of artists, writers and thinkers which opened up Britain to Surrealism. Surrealism was an art and literary movement founded in Paris in 1924 with the publication of the Surrealist Manifesto by André Breton. Now, Agar moved to Paris in the late 1920s and befriended Breton, Picasso, and many others, and in that way really connected with the new art movements coming out of France. Extraordinarily, we actually know when and where Eileen Agar wore these gloves. She wore them in 1938 to an exhibition opening in London at a gallery called the London Gallery of the Belgian surrealist René Magritte. These gloves attracted the attention of a journalist who was reporting on this important exhibition. He noticed that Eileen Agar was wearing gloves with scarlet fingernails. Sometime after that, Eileen Agar seems to have attached these gloves to a hat, maybe a new one, maybe one that she already owned. Gloves like these, with these extraordinary painted fingernails, are normally associated with Elsa Schiaparelli, the most discussed dress designer in interwar Paris. Elsa Schiaparelli was known for her collaborations with artists, particularly those in the Surrealist movement, such as Salvador Dalí, but also Jean Cocteau. These fingernail gloves were originally designed by Elsa Schiaparelli in the late 1920s. She designed them to be knitted in black and white. Elsa Schiaparelli's first knitted fingernail gloves from the late 1920s influenced artists straight away. There's a Man Ray photograph of a pair of hands which have been painted by Pablo Picasso to look like a pair of gloves with stitching but also with fingernails. She revisited the idea for her 1936 winter collection, creating black leather gloves with red fingernails. But you'll notice that these gloves don't fit either of those descriptions. Yes, they're leather, but they're pale, sort of tan beige, and the fingernails are a kind of pinky scarlet. So we have the impression that these are in fact not Schiaparelli gloves, but gloves that Eileen Agar has made herself or had a friend do because she was inspired by Schiaparelli. Gloves were a source of inspiration for the Surrealists, who found them like disembodied hands to be uncanny and unusual, something that we feel very familiar with, but in this environment where it's a hand that's not quite there, they feel very strange. Schiaparelli really played into the strangeness, the uncanniness of gloves. In another pair made in collaboration with Salvador Dalí again, she made them in pink and with these extraordinary kind of ruffles up your arms that make it feel as if somehow the skin has been ruptured. In the 1930s, women would have worn hats every day, every time they left the house. this object would have been relatively ordinary until Eileen Agar typically made it extraordinary. Eileen Agar loved collage and its sculptural sister assemblage, where you're bringing together found objects which were previously unconnected in interesting ways. She really enjoyed the wit and irreverence that came with this, and so it's no surprise to see Eileen Agar taking two accessories, ones that would normally be worn far apart on the body, and putting them together. And you'll notice that just on the front here, she's used an ammonite fossil brooch to attach the gloves to the hat. This was typical of Eileen Agar, who was fascinated by beachcombing. That's where she picked up many of the found objects that she included in her work. This is not a surprise in that she spent a lot of time at the seaside, both in Cornwall and in the south of France. She used to holiday there with friends like Picasso, Man Ray, Lee Miller, Roland Penrose, and Nouche and Paul Eluard, who were all connected with the Surrealist movement. Eileen Agar's Surrealism was really rooted in nature. She found inspiration in the natural world around her, whether that was when she was beachcombing or exploring the cliffs of Brittany, trying to find extraordinary rocks to photograph. With her photograph of a rock that she described as the bum thumb, she's clearly finding human body parts in the craggy landscape of northern France. Agar saw the potential of collage and assemblage for bringing together disconnected objects, things which were everyday materials, to make something otherworldly. She often used materials which were close to hand, for example, things that she had received in the post or things around her home. We even have a collage in the collection where we can see her address. It's clearly a piece of packaging which has been sent to her that she used as the backboard for an artwork called The Artist Rampant. Her entire home was almost like a collage in that she had walls covered with her art. And all of the furniture was designed by her friend, the architect Rodney Thomas, who created this impossibly chic Art Deco furniture for Eileen Agar, and much of it still survives. We even have her wardrobe in the collection. Another hat in the collection by Eileen Agar is called the Ceremonial Hat for Eating Bouillabaisse, named for a Provençal fish stew originating from the port town of Marseille in the south of France. That hat is made from a cork bowl, which Agar picked up in Saint-Tropez, which she turned upside down and put on top seashells and coral, a fishbone, and even a spiky urchin. She was so pleased with the hat that in the late 1940s, she even appeared on television, walking through the streets of London, wearing the hat and really turning heads.
The creation of Surrealist artist Eileen Agar, to the man in the street, it's all a bit confusing. But its designer explains it as a ceremonial hat for eating bouillabaisse, exotic fish dish of the south of France, so now you know. Amazement or envy?
It's a good question of whether these are hats or whether these are sculptures, art pieces. It's interesting that in the mid-1930s, this was a live question. We see that in 1934, a Paris court declared that women's hats were works of art and could be copyrighted by milliners. Eileen Agar and Elsa Schiaparelli were definitely kindred spirits in finding humour in hats. Elsa Schiaparelli herself said that she liked to amuse herself by creating women's hats, and one of her most famous hats was in fact created with another artist, the surrealist Salvador Dalí. Together they produced the shoe hat, which appeared to be an upside-down shoe on the wearer's head. It was typically surrealist to fetishize gloves, shoes, items which suggested the presence of a fragmented body part. And it's maybe then a witty riposte that we have here of Eileen Agar bringing two other accessories together. It's another nod to her naturally surrealist worldview. There are no photos of anyone wearing this hat, but there is a photograph of Eileen Agar potentially wearing an Elsa Schiaparelli hat. In a photograph by Lee Miller, we see Eileen Agar's shadow, and in it she's clearly wearing a very tall, a very elongated hat of just the kind of design that Elsa Schiaparelli was producing in this period. There's a good chance that that's the only time that Agar gets photographed in a Schiaparelli hat, and it's so telling that it's a shadow rather than Agar herself. So it's just like the gloves, which are a hand that's not quite there. We have Agar, a shadow, in a Schiaparelli hat. This is one of my favourite objects in the V&A because I love Eileen Agar's work, but also because it really pushes at that boundary between art and fashion. We often think of fashion designers as seeking inspiration from artists, but here we have an artist seeking inspiration from fashion.